Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haynie.
This is the day the Lord has made. We're ready to rejoice and be glad in it. I am glad that you are with us. And there's no place I'd rather be than talking with you about what really matters in this world, about what it means to live out our faith in such a time as this. Right now, you were made for such a time as this. And you're like, okay, that's great and all. I'm very encouraged, but what do I do? What do I do with that information? Well, I'm glad you asked because I have those same questions. And I take them to people like Dan Hudson, who's my guest today from Pathway Church in Johnston. Dan has all the answers. And Dan, you're joining us. Thank you so much.
I am so glad to be here because I do have the answers. I can make them up if I don't have real ones. And I think I can, I've done this long enough, I can sound convincing. So
yes, that's all that matters, really. It's not, haven't we learned that from each political press conference? It's as depressing as that is. All that matters is that you sound confident about it.
Whether you say anything or not.
Right. There's no fact checking. That doesn't happen. All that matters is that you say, yes, I've answered that question. Moving on. No comments. Just say it confidently. No, we have more than that. That's the cool thing, is that we have a God who never changes. We have a God whose word is always true and always constant. And he's given us the answers when we're walking around feeling like we don't know what's going on. There's a place you can go. It's like that old advertising comment. It's like, there's an app for that. There's a word. God's got that. God's got an answer for that. And we need to rediscover these truths that he's given to us and dig down deep into what they mean for us and how to apply it for our lives. And we've been doing that through Dan's gracious teaching in this crash course in spiritual disciplines, a spinoff, if you will, of the abundantly popular course at Pathway Church. And this is the radio version. And so we're doing a crash course, like I said, in what it means to be a disciple of Christ. Because contrary to popular opinion, being a Christian isn't just something that you do like for an hour on Sunday or then talk about it or wear a cross around your neck and then suddenly it's like you're in the club. It actually means to follow after Christ. And what does that mean? What does that look like? We've talked about some of the very practical application of, these are behaviors that you do. You are in the Word. You are taking time with God. You are praying with Him. You are fasting in spiritual application of what we know and searching for God's will. We are learning last week we talked about submission, which, that's a doozy in this day and age, what it is, what it isn't. So check out the podcast for that. And then this week we're talking about service, which, if last week's was the least politically correct Christian discipline, this one might be the most popular or among the most popular, because I think even people that don't have a Christian perspective on life appreciate what Christians have done for the world. That's a conversation that if people are, I guess I never say never, because there's a lot of people that don't understand the history of the world anymore. And that's a conscious effort on behalf of the schools that are brainwashing our kids. But that's another rant for another day. Most people who have lived in the world, who have seen the great good across Western civilization particularly, but globally across the last 2,000 years, that despite intense persecution, Christians have made a positive, a huge, abundantly outsized positive impact on the world because of our dedication to service, to serving the least of these in particular, from hospitals to orphanages to, setting up treasuries and trusts for the poor, and providing for people who can't provide for themselves, to help support families in need, all of the homeless, all of these things. Christians have long been known for our dedication to that, which of course comes from our dedication to following Christ. So I'm excited to talk about this one today because we're going to get back in YouTube's good graces. This is the one.
Ooh, it should be. You're right. You look at a lot of the names of hospitals or schools or all kinds of things. You have the image of Christ on that. It's Christian people who rose up and said, we ought to do something. I'm involved with a mission in Zimbabwe. We're going there in 2 weeks, and we have a hospital. We're not making any money off of that thing. We have 28 schools, over 20,000 students any given day are learning how to read and write and just plain education. They're learning some Jesus too, but we're trying to make that place better, not only spiritually but also physically, mind, body, soul. But yeah. So and this resonates. It's kind of funny because we were looking at our own church saying, okay, yeah, we do these world mission things. And are we doing enough here? And now we go every 2 weeks. We go into homeless camps and we're talking to people and feeding them and serving them, it's been a really neat thing because not everybody can go to Africa.
Mhm.
Um, and it's why do we do that? There's literally nothing in it for us, but we know, like you mentioned, that the least of these, there are people, they still need to eat, whether you agree with how they got there or not, or whether you like the fact they're there, or whatever, all the arguments that the pushback that you might get, or
Mhm.
even internal arguments you might have with yourself, like, if I give them money, am I helping a bad habit? I don't know. We do know they need food. And so we go and make sure it's a prepared hot meal. And anyway, so it's service. Yeah, it is the core of Christianity,
Mm.
for sure.
So,
And
oh, I was just going to say, I think then let's definitely get into our motivations as well during the course of the hour as we establish
yeah,
this
yeah,
as a practice. Because I know, because Jesus says so, there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. And there's lots of positive and negative examples. So we want to do it the right thing for the right reasons for sure.
yeah, yeah. Even in the church, we can be a little bit off and
Really?
miss the point. Yeah, it's hard to believe. We're people, right? I mean, you look at the disciples. Jesus has 3 years to mold them and shape them, and they're seeing things happening that are mind blowing, right? I mean, they're watching people's legs be restored to health, and people who are blind see. I mean, things that we've read it enough time. We're like, well, of course, yeah. But it's like this just came out of nowhere, I mean, Peter was a fisherman, and all of a sudden he's walking around with this guy who's talking about the mysteries of the ages and he raising people from the dead, and I mean, it's like, what a ride they're on. And it's interesting that as much of a fantastic experience as that had to be, the one thing they tended to argue about was, well, who's the greatest? you
Mm.
know,
Status.
who's I mean, because sometimes Jesus, we talked about this, he'd go off to pray, or he might just disappear for 40 days and fast, or I mean, it wasn't like they walked his every single step. There were times that he'd take off, and they're like, okay, now what? So who's next in command? Yeah,
Mm.
who's
Right.
who's the next? And when this great kingdom is established, that they're of course thinking, physical nation. Well, who's going to be, in the most powerful positions? Who's next? And they wanted to rate each other. In Luke 9:46, an argument, it says, started among them about who was the greatest of them, and that happened way too often. It happens in our context too. You get a group of ladies together to start a knitting circle or whatever it is ladies do. They never invite me. Pretty soon that the conversation, who's the greatest, who's the better, and you better follow my example. I mean, that's just our human carnal thing. Get a bunch of dudes together, we're going to do the same thing, and I'm smarter than you or better than you, my kids are better, whatever, all the stuff. And uh in this disciples arena, they had to figure out, well, who's next, uh and I don't know if any of them wanted to be the greatest. They just didn't want to be the least.
Hmm.
That's my thought. I mean, I'm comfortable in the middle somewhere. Don't have people having high expectations. But I don't want to be the least. I don't want to be, oh, there's the loser guy. There's one no one cares about. And I think maybe that was part of their argument. A number of years ago, I worked at Target, and it was very specific. Any retail, doesn't matter what retail you go to, any company really, it's very specific, right? There is a store manager, and he was the king. He'd walk in, and whatever he said, he just goes. Everybody
Mhm.
knew it was him. Well, and they had all these other layers. That there was there was like the store team leader. Then there was like the executive team. I never did get all these names down. I'd call people the wrong things. But then each department had their own leader, and then each department had someone out on the floor that was like leading the crew. And then you got the crew
Mhm.
people. I was just a crew dude. I was like putting stuff on the shelf, like I was just making a few dollars. And there would be little struggles within that group of like, they all knew they weren't going to be the general manager,
Mm.
but they wanted to be better than me, and I really messed them up because I could give a rip. That wasn't my career. I was honestly, I was doing it to raise money for the church.
Mm,
And my
sure.
paycheck just went to the church, and I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun, and I got to mix with some people. But while all these people are trying to divide for who's not last, I'd like, I'll be, I didn't, you don't say it that way, but I just like, okay, I'll take the dirt jobs. I'll take do the jobs nobody wants to do, because it pays this. I'd always say, well, it pays the same as that guy out there, right? Well, yeah, okay. I mean, I'll do it. They look at me weird and everything. But I think that's our issue. We just don't want them to be last. And that becomes true in any circle that you're a part of. And so the disciples, they keep bringing this pecking order up to Jesus. Who's the greatest? Who's the greatest? And one time even James and John's mom asked, well, hey, can my children be the greatest? Can they sit at the right and left? That was a symbol of greatness in their culture.
I love that
And
image
here we
as a
are.
mom. And I'm just like, yeah, I want what's best for my kids. But do you have
right?
what it takes to go up to Jesus and be just like, hey, can you make my sons the greatest? Because they're good boys. They're good boys. We love them.
I tell you what,
just be like
God
the crown
bless.
prince of heaven here on your left or right side.
God bless all the coaches of youth sports out there, K through 12. I mean, I was the dad of a child. And I'd be like, why isn't my child out there? The full game. Why is this other riffraff out there? I could give every reason my daughter was better. And I thought,
Bless their
the
hearts.
struggle is real. So yeah, there's James and John's mom doing the same thing. So they get to the Passover, and they don't know it's the Last Supper. They don't know what Jesus is doing.
Sure.
It's just another Passover. And typically in their culture, the lowest person. So that's how you find out who's the lowest, the one washing feet. Okay. That's the lowest person. So normally it could be a slave, or it could have been, if there's no slaves around, maybe one of the children, no children around, maybe one of the women. I mean, they had a very specific order and ranking there. And evidently there were no slaves and no children and no women in the room when they were sitting there, the disciples looking around at each other, and they're trying to figure out who's going to wash the feet, having that conversation. Who's next? Who's the greatest? Who's next? I don't, it's not going to be me. And that's when Jesus kind of look at him like, are you serious? And he has that famous time where he, gets on his knees and starts washing his disciples' feet. And he washes their feet. And basically he's saying that, let me redefine the word greatest for you. I think you misunderstand. You keep using that word. I don't think you know what that word means.
Right. Yes.
Who is the greatest? And in John 13 says, so if I, your Lord and teacher, who's clearly the greatest in the room, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do just as I have done for you. Now, the point isn't that we go around washing each other's feet. I mean, I know there's some traditions out there that do that, whatever, I don't care. The point is, like, in your life, live as a servant, live as someone who is the least. If any room you enter, you're the least by volunteer. Not because you're the nerdiest, or your clothes are the most outdated, or you didn't take a bath today, or what you choose. I'm going to be the least. I'm going to live as a servant. I think in many ways, most of us would rather hear Jesus say, hey, go sell all your possessions and give it to the poor. That seems a little easier. At least I can get that done and check that off my list and move on. This is a continuous lifestyle. This doesn't end. It's not that you do that for the first 5 years of being a Christian and then you get to kind of taper off. You've paid your dues. This is forever. This is forever. Becoming a servant, I think it's Foster who said, is like dying 1,000 little deaths, humbly bowing to other people time after time after time after time. And it's that attitude. I'm the least. I'm the one. He says, Richard Foster says, service banishes us to the mundane, the ordinary, the trivial. There goes the limelight we're looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, there goes all the goals. It's like it goes against everything we're raised. I raised my kids that I always told my kids, you work a little harder than everybody else, study a little harder, you'll outdo them all. And not in an effort of being conceited, but I trained them to work harder and think harder and do harder.
Right. Be excellent.
Be excellent. Do everything better. Yeah. And they both excelled in with crazy. Who would have thought, right? But they also have learned this they both have PhDs behind their name, but you'd never know it unless their dad was out there jumping around saying, "Hey, my daughter's a doctor." I mean, they don't run around, doing that because they understand ultimately what's more important than that is to be the least, in the room.
Well, and it's the understanding that I'm kind of, people make fun of me for quoting C.S. Lewis a ton, but I really appreciate his idea of humility, which I think goes along with what you're talking about here. We were even talking about that as a family in our devotions. What does that really mean? That it's not that, and I'll paraphrase a bit here, so it's not a direct quote. I'm not swiping from him. But he said that humility in itself is not it's not just a negative view of yourself. It's not just putting yourself down all the time, because that can be just as disingenuous as someone who's always praising themselves and vaunting themselves. He said it's really more of a realistic way of looking at the world. It's recognizing the strengths. And he said he thought that heaven would be like that. That if we're understanding who we are in perfect reality, then you see your strengths and you see, maybe your weaknesses too, but you've got to be realistic about them. And then you see everyone else in exactly that way, that you can honestly glorify them for the strengths and the beauties and the talents and the skills that God has given them. And that there's no sense of competition. There's no sense that says I have to be better than you because, or you're so much better than me because, and having this kind of comparison constantly over and over again. When you said knitting circle, I'm like, I was never good enough to be in a knitting circle, so I am not Becky Homeki over here. But the truth is, when we get together as human beings, we're always comparing ourselves. We're always thinking, oh, thank God I'm not like that guy, and we don't say that usually, but there are other little code ways that we try to rank ourselves. And that's not to say that everyone always has to have exactly the same, number of trophies or exactly the same number of grains of rice in your pot. That's not what this is about. It's about not constantly using your worth to compare with someone else, to put them down, to try to gain, more notoriety, to try and be more wealthy, more attractive, more than any of these other things. It's that constant competition to say, am I worthy? Am I worthy? Who has the authority? Because I think those are two different things. One of them is looking inward to see our value, to prove our value over and over again by comparing ourselves and coming out better, coming out on top compared to some other human being who is an equal image bearer in the eyes of God. So that's a bit of a problem. But then the other one is to show my value, to make sure that what I say goes, so that I have the authority, that I have the power, that people have to listen to me, that I have that kind of influence. And I think that's why we struggle with, those are two reasons that we struggle with the notion of being the servant of anyone. Let alone, it's stinky and it's uncomfortable and we don't want to, always be the one doing the dirty jobs. And yet Jesus is willing to humble himself in ultimate submission to, the Bible says, empty. He emptied himself of his rightful glory and his rightful place, so that he was the Lamb of God slain from the foundation of the world, that he took our place. And he says, okay, go do likewise. How can we say no?
Right. When we talked about submission, we talked about how it's actually a freedom. It brings freedom. You just don't have to worry about the other stuff. The same thing with service. It frees us up to not play the pecking order game. Like I mentioned at Target, I didn't care. I just like, okay, you win. All right. We're not compelled to be thought of as the greatest person in the room because I'm not. And I'm, why don't you get to be the greatest today? What a great act of service that is. We don't have to have the final say in every conversation. We all know people who have to talk big and loud and try to have an answer to everything because it's an internal thing. They're afraid that they're going to be the least. If I just talk big and loud and have an answer for everything, they'll know I'm not the least. And I'm like, I'm the least. I just don't. I used to have to answer those people like, dude, that's not even correct. Like you're just saying, you're making that up, and or it would make me mad on the inside. It's like, just stop it. Stop saying things like that. And then I finally freed myself to say, you know what, just whatever. Obviously, there's something inside that makes me feel like they got to be known as something beyond what they are, and let them do that. How exhausting that would have to be.
It is.
So
It is.
attitude is this discipline of service frees us from being exhausted. We exhaust ourselves.
You just described my experience on social media on a daily basis, Dan. And to tell the truth, like I've been that person that thought,
Yeah.
okay, I have to have the best arguments and I have to win the arguments. And so that's been a temptation, a lot. And you think that if you just say the right thing, like not
Yeah.
only will that person come away a little smarter because of course your opinions are right, but also, everyone's going to kind of know, hey, you have the right answers and you're going to be the go-to guy or the go-to guy. And so that feeds the pride. It's just an ugly cycle. But at the same time, now hopefully as God continues to work on me and I'm a work in progress, I can now see that sometimes in other people. And I'll just be like, okay, this is it's good conversation. I'll just let you, have the last word. It means something to you to have the last word on the subject. I'm like, you know what? I think I've made my point. And if you want to go ahead and continue to talk, that's perfectly fine. Go with God. But I'm going to do other things now because this is a full-time job.
Right. I got to the point, like on social media, how you can take 16 pictures to get the right one, which has the best angle. And I started posting the ones that are the least, flattering, because I think it's hilarious, because who does that, right? I mean, I'll put just the worst pictures sometimes. Sometimes they're just goofy, but like I started doing this thing. I kind of look like I'm looking off to the side, like I'm not even looking at the camera or whatever. I'm looking at something, and then that became like, oh, you got to do another one of those pictures. I'm like, well, okay, So I'm trying to make myself look dorky. I can't help it. I can't.
There's no rest for the dorky.
That's right. But it's so freeing to like, okay, look, you saw 6 of my chins. That's awesome. Whatever. I mean, I'm usually the only one who gets to see that. Now you get to see it too.
We're so lucky. We're so blessed. Thank you. Thanks for that, Dan. And I didn't even mention, I was going to try to find a way to wedge it in the conversation, but this is as good an on-ramp as any, that you entered the chat, so to speak, with the full-size turtle costume. Completely out of context. I have no idea why you were dressed as a turtle to do your work today, but our radio audience needs to know that sometimes when Dan goes to work at Pathway, it includes dressing as a turtle. I don't know why. You were the
first to see me in a turtle costume. I've always been a fan of the tortoise and the hare. I've always been the tortoise, and every time I read the book, the tortoise always wins.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's consistently been my goal in life. It's just slow and easy, steady. Just keep doing your thing, and don't worry about the person over there jumping up and down and hopping around and like, the next big wow. I don't know how many big mega wow church guys out there have come and gone in the 40 years now I've been preaching. And at the time I thought, man, if I could only be so-and-so. And it's like, no, they ended up in divorce. It's like, nah, oh, nope, that church collapsed. It's like, they went to a rehab. It's like, I just love Jesus, and that's all that matters. You go ahead and be the greatest there, buddy. I'll put on a turtle costume and we'll talk about Jesus.
I love it. I love it so much. Dan out of context is the best.
Yes,
and you're in the turtle club. I personally invite you into the turtle club.
To keep me away from Damascus, he'll try to catch me. I hadn't thought about that till now. Oh no. I'll be in his backyard in a cage.
That is the best inside joke ever. Oh my goodness. I love it. So if you didn't understand that, send all your comments to Dan Hudson.
I do have a legitimate comparison here.
Okay. All right. Let's make this make sense.
Self-righteous service versus true service. Because even I think that's a growth, right? I mean, because even like I first started really hearing, service themes in college, and it blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought I'm supposed to be number one. I thought I'm supposed to go at it, and so in my world, that was like revolutionary. And so you immediately think, okay, I need to start, serving. But even then, I think there's a growth graph you got to go through, because you start becoming a little bit self-righteous in your service. Like, you can. Man, I'm a great servant,
Yeah. Look how really great I am at being the least. This is awesome.
And so I think I'm pretty sure this list came from Richard Foster as well. This comparison of self-righteous service versus true service. Self-righteous service comes through human effort. You're taking energy, you're calculating, you're scheming, you're trying to figure out how do we help these people. Like we got this homeless ministry and we start scheming. Okay, I'm going to go help those people. Why? Because, well, by golly, it looks good to help people. So I'm going to go make sure y'all got cameras, right? We're going to take pictures of this and we're going to do this, right? True service, it comes from a relationship with God. How our ministry began was there was a guy who was involved in the ministry and he was lamenting that it was kind of winding down this group he was with that were doing homeless stuff. And he was so excited about the things that were going on. And like, I just felt this little nudge, this little whisper, a God thing of saying, well, I mean, can't we do that? And I kind of just halfway said it out loud, not knowing what to expect. And like, it's been one of the most fantastic things we've ever done. It just every 2 weeks we're out there. We know people by name and we're building relationships. And that's what I said with them is like, we're going to do this not to just pat ourselves on the back and say, look how many food items we gave out, or how many bottles, or how many of water, or how many, whatever. We're going to build relationships, and we're going to concentrate on one particular camp, and we're just going to camp there. We're going to go there every 2 weeks, and we're just going to know their names and have Jesus conversations, and we're going to pray with them, not to get anything out of it, but to pour into them. And that's been beautiful. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. And
I am sure 20 years ago, that would have been more about me. Let's all make sure we got our church shirts on. Let's make sure, somehow, even though you don't look like you mean it, but you want to be notified, people to notice this.
Yeah.
And it's been the opposite. And it's beautiful. Now, sometimes we'll do post pictures, but even then, I feel weird about that. But it's more like saying, "Come and join us," not look how awesome we are.
Yeah.
But of course, no one knows the attitude behind
a
photo. But that's the difference between self-righteous and actual true service.
Well, I'd love to talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to take a break so that Ron is happy.
We must keep Ron happy.
Props to Ron for making us sound good. By the way, shout out to Ron. Dan Hudson is our excellent guest. He is taking us through our crash course in spiritual disciplines. This week, we're talking about service. And when we come back, we're going to talk about more differences in service. We're going to check our motivations, because this is heart level stuff. It doesn't take much to, you can put anything, especially in an Instagram age, out online, say, look at what a good person I am. That's not what this is about. We're going to check our hearts and what it means to follow Christ in the element of service when we return. You're listening to FaithWorks Live. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small, because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard. When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to Intervisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help. From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, Intervision serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve, that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at Intervisions Healthcare Clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at intervisionshealthcare.org. That's intervisionshealthcare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273. said, this is Rebecca Haynie with FaithWorks Live, Dan Hudson, my friend, over at Pathway Church, and he is so gracious as to lead us on this crash course in spiritual disciplines. Today, we're talking about service. So this is where the rubber meets the road. You actually are living out your faith. You're serving the way the King of the universe came to earth, not to be served, but to serve. And then he says to you and me and to everyone who wants to bear his name, go and do likewise. This is how we, like, completely backwards, paradoxical image of a kingdom where the greatest among us is the one who serves all, will be the servant, the slave, literally translated, the slave of all, the one who's willing to do the dirty jobs, the thankless jobs, to get down and to serve the needs of anyone else and not care about who gets the credit or, you know, who is the greatest. There's no pecking order like that in the kingdom of God, or if there is, it's completely reversed. So Dan has been going through what it means to serve. And where I stopped you before, Dan, because we got to keep Ron happy. Thanks for joining us on the other side of this break. We were talking about the difference between these more self-motivated kinds of actions, the more the arrogant, secret motivations of our heart that are based, you know, improperly, and what it means to truly serve in a Christ-like way. And we just gotten started on this list. So how can we know, again, how can we tell the difference between the more selfish motivations and making sure that we're doing it out of the right heart? Because I think even Christians sometimes struggle with this, especially in a time when we're living out loud for all to see. Everyone's, you know, it's like you don't even have a meal. You don't even have, you know, an experience unless you take a photo of it and post it on your social media. So how is it, I think, to live authentically? That's a big question for a lot of people. And Christians don't do it just to be seen, but there's also that added benefit that I think sometimes the enemy comes in and starts whispering, but you'd look like such a good Christian if you just post this on Instagram with the right filter. And that's not what it's about. So please continue. How can we tell the difference?
Okay, this is one I have had to personally grow through myself. Because it's a self-righteous service that wants to go for the big deal, right? They want the splash. And it kind of overlaps with what we said before the break. You know, I want impressive numbers, the viral post. I want the news media to show up. I want everyone to be, you know, excited about what we're doing. And why? Because, well, then they might come to our church and it's a big momentum builder. And the real goal was self-glorification there. Or even the church glorification. Our brand is better than your brand. Come to our brand because we're doing these great things, you know. As opposed to the true service, it's genuinely impossible to distinguish between the small and the large scale service. There's nothing wrong with large scale services. Maybe God will call you into something there's a big thing going on. You know, Blackaby says, you know, find where God's working and join him there. You know, and maybe it's in the midst of stuff. You're like, hey, I want to help, and you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's this fine little line in our hearts of, is our goal the big splash, or was our goal to serve someone? And so it could be one single guy on a sidewalk who hasn't eaten, as opposed to, you know, flying in with our van or with our trailer and pulling out the grill and smelling the atmosphere like, you know, grilled burgers and come on everybody for a burger. You know, there may be valid with both, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. All I know is God called me to feed that guy. I'm going to feed him, or whatever act of service you might be doing. A third way, self-righteous service requires external rewards. Again, the need for people to know, to be appreciated. Boy, you put all the effort on it. Yep, I sure did. You know, humble me. You know, versus resting contented in hiddenness. Which I have coached our people, like when I keep bringing the homeless as such an easy thing to talk about. I've coached our guys like, hey, don't wear a Pathway shirt. We don't care if they know what church we're from. They know we're church people. They know we're Jesus people. I don't care what brand. We're not here to promote our brand. And so we're okay just being Jesus people who show up with a sandwich. You know, I just want, you know what? Hey, we just want to have a meal today. That's all I know. And God love you. A fourth thing, highly concerned with results. In other words, will they reciprocate? Now, and that's why guys, well, we need to give invites to church. It's like, well, why? If they ask, we can tell them. but it's not like we gave you the sandwich, now you owe it to come.
Hmm.
You know, you owe, we scratch your back, you scratch ours. That's not what that's a self-righteous type of service, or anything. You serve someone at the office, like I'm going to do this report for you, now you owe me, you know, a thing or whatever it is.
Yeah.
True service is free of the need to calculate results. Doesn't matter. I just did it to do it. Whether you know I did it, whether you, I mean, doesn't matter. Whether you do it back, doesn't matter. You don't owe me anything. Right.
Yeah.
I do it in the name of Jesus.
And thinking about the freeing nature of that, I mean,
Yeah.
there's that classic question, like, is there such a thing as a selfless act? Because there's always some, benefit. What is in this for me? And our
Yeah.
brains just are kind of wired that way, where it goes
We
into,
are.
how is this going to make me look? Or how is this going to be good for me? How is that return on investment going? And that is why, as a side note, I think that's why one of the most beautiful acts that you can do are the things that people never see at home with your family, specifically, because
Yeah.
like everybody can do that. No matter what your situation is, maybe you feel like you can't do these big, broad, global missions or acts of service, but you can always love somebody well. And with those of us in families, like if you're a mom or a dad, you're going to be changing a lot of dirty diapers. You're going to be wiping a lot of bodily fluids up off the floor. You're going to be on, like, I almost asked the question, but I didn't really want to know the answer as to how many bodily fluids did you wipe up today on on your bathroom floor or your kitchen. Like, my record so far in a 24-hour period is 15. And and that's one of those things you don't ever get to brag about, except in this weird twisted way. But I don't say that to be like, oh, what an awesome mom I am. It's the funny aspect of the upside down nature of how God calls us to serve. No one's ever going to need to know that. And my kids, when growing up, are not going to be like, I can't keep a tally of dirty diapers. I don't do it for that reason, to say like, oh, well, when you're grown up and you become a doctor, you pay me back. That's not what this is about. It's about loving your child. It's about providing for their needs. It's about caring for them. And of course you will. Of course, as a mom or a dad or a loving grandma or grandpa, you would do these things to see your child smile. You do these things because you love them and you don't expect this return. If you do that, for your spouse, you're serving your spouse. You do it just to see them smile. You don't take tallies of every dirty dish or every time you mowed the grass, do you? I mean, that's probably shouldn't.
If you do, that's self-righteous service.
But we do that sometimes with God. I don't know. I think we have to be contented with the opposite of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about getting noticed for the things that we do. It's about being content with just doing the right thing and caring about that other person and saying, no one's ever going to know about this except God, who sees those things in secret. He sees those hidden things. And that's, of course, when Jesus is chastising the Pharisees. He's like, all you do is to be seen by people. And that's all you're going to get. That's just the reward. I hope you're happy with the reward you have right now, because this is all that it doesn't matter to God if you're doing it to be popular with human beings. What matters is God sees the things that are hidden in secret. And that is beautiful in the eyes of our Father. Those hidden acts of service that you're never going to get the credit. It doesn't matter. No one's ever going to see and recognize you for that or make you famous for that. It doesn't matter. You know that you're doing it from a love of God and from a love of that other person. And He sees, and that's precious in His sight.
Yeah. Another self-righteous service is picks and chooses whom to serve. And I don't know, let's say you're in the middle of a block and it's wintertime and it's icy, and to your left, you see a professional athlete fall and slip to the ground, and you look to the right and an elderly woman with a cane slips and falls to the ground. Like, who do you instantly want to go help? Well, I'm pretty sure the professional athlete's going to be able to handle it. Even if they hurt themselves, I mean, they're fine. But they're millionaires, and maybe you get their autograph, and maybe they'll mention your name in a press conference or whatever. How about that little old lady over there who truly needs your help? Well, yeah, obviously you'll go there, and that's the true service, indiscriminate in its ministry. I don't care. I'm not. You need service. I'm going to serve you. You may be the wealthiest person on the planet. You may have nothing. You still deserve whatever it is, the service. Number 6, self-righteous service is affected by moods and whims. You have to be in the right feeling, in the right mood. Like, I don't feel like going to the homeless thing today. I was like, I'm tired, or I want a snack. There's a football game coming up. Versus serves because there's a need. You know what? I know you got your football game to watch. Those people haven't eaten.
Hmm.
Again,
Yeah.
I'm using the same example, but
Aren't you glad God doesn't do that? He's just like, I
oh
really
man,
don't feel like letting the sun rise on you ungrateful people one more time. I don't
I know.
like
I'd
he
be so tired
could.
of me.
I am. I looked at me. I know me. And I
I
don't like,
know.
yeah, that's so much
I know what you
patience.
actually think,
Right. That's
not
the
just what you
thing.
do. Yeah,
And I have those moments too. I'm just like, really? No one's good. I'm slaving over a stove to make a dinner that people are going to complain about, that someone's going to throw across the room. Nobody wants to eat it anyway.
yeah.
Because I
There'll
love
be
you
bodily fluids
guys.
later.
It's all going out anyway in the wash. But God doesn't do that. And that's the reminder that like brings me back to where I'm supposed to be in that mindset of like, what if God did that? What if God just lost patience? He's just like, you know what? No rain for you anymore. Like, no, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, no more oxygen. Like y'all are messing it up. Like, don't do this. He never does that. He never loses patience. He is always long suffering. He's always loving. He always provides for us on the just and the unjust. And he doesn't expect that return. Like he's not doing it contingent on us receiving it appropriately. He does it because he's love.
yeah, absolutely. So another. There's only two left here, or no, three. Self-righteous is temporary. True service is a lifestyle. So it's like this is why I don't like church work days. I've seen churches like we're not doing Sunday service today. We're going breaking yard. We're doing whatever. And I think, we can still have church, but y'all but have been should be raking those yards anyway. I mean, do you really have to cancel church to have a work day, to have a serve the neighborhood day or something? Do it if you want, whatever. I'm not criticizing churches, but it rubs me a little wrong because I think because that's an event, and when the event is done, then I'm done. Same with our little homeless thing. We go every 2 weeks. Well, when the event's done, we get in our cars and we drive away, and we've checked that off, and we're done. Rather than, I'll bet you, the next day we'll see someone who has a need. And it's like, well, no, we did that yesterday. That's temporary. That's a self-righteous kind.
He should have
As
caught me on
opposed
a
to,
Monday.
another need. Yeah,
He should have caught me on a Monday.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
him
yeah.
problem.
Look at that. My calendar doesn't agree with your need today. So, and so that's the idea of, years ago, we went to dinner with some friends, and we left and had leftovers, and there was a homeless guy out there. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And the gal we were with, she gave him her food, and we kept walking, and like she didn't make a big deal out of it. She just, and I'm like, wait, what just happened? Like I had to ask, like, what just happened? Oh, I gave him my leftovers. Like I'd never heard of such a thing. I mean, those are my leftovers. I mean, there's all the things on this list. They're like, what? I mean, I paid money for that. Go get a job. These guys have a help wanted job sign right there on the window. You can earn your own food. All those thoughts go through my mind. That's why I say this has been a learning process. That was 22 years ago that happened. We're still good friends with her, and it's that always made an impression on me, and kind of cut to my, well, I'm the teacher guy. I can define service for you, and she did it.
Right.
So it was as a lifestyle, and she still does that kind of stuff. Insensitive is a self-righteous service, and insists on meeting the need, even if it would be destructive.
Ooh, okay.
Demands the opportunity to help. When I was in college, there was a poor guy. He was a socially awkward guy, wonderful human being. Didn't know how to handle girls, and so he tried extra hard. I'll never forget. One day, him running down the hallway, a girl with her arms full of books, ready to open a door. This is before they had all the automatic doors, and he ran by, pushed the books out of her hand, and opened the door for her.
Wow.
He didn't mean to. It was awkward.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, okay, that's like, no, I will open the door for you no matter what it costs you.
Yeah.
So that was embarrassing. He helped her pick him up and stuff and everything. But we'll do that with people. Like, well, I think you need this, so we're going to meet this need. We took a hairdresser down to the homeless thing, and some of the people like, I don't want a haircut. We're like, okay. I mean, it's just an opportunity if you wanted. It wasn't like, no, your hair is kind of gross and you all need a haircut and a wash.
Yeah.
Nope. We weren't going to force anything on them. But then when they did it, you should have seen their big old bright smiles. They were beaming, just a little bit of dignity. But we're not there to force it.
Right. Well, and
And
that's
that's the
something that
versus the true service. I can withhold the service as freely as perform it. You listen with tenderness and patience, and it's like, no, I'm here to mow your yard. Well, no, actually, I'm letting it grow, or whatever. It's like, no, I
Mhm.
want to do this because I don't like it.
Yeah.
So the last one, self-righteous service fractures community. It centers on the glorification of the person, puts others in debt, leads to manipulation. I did this for you, now you must do things for me.
Mhm.
The verse, the opposite of that is true service builds community. It just quietly goes about caring for needs, and it heals, and it builds people, and it's just an overall positive. So
Mhm.
so a lot of that is a fine line between one and the other, but it
Yeah.
truly is a heart change. When it becomes a discipline and a lifestyle, it starts freeing you up to do some of these acts of service without all of the baggage that we try to add to it.
Mhm.
Just serve people.
Right. Well, and I think there are, I would say, some legitimate concerns. Sometimes they're just excuses. Like, I don't want to do the dirty job, and no matter what I say, it's just an excuse to to get out of doing a dirty job or a thankless task, right? Like,
Yeah.
my time would just be better spent doing something else that's going to build my, my wealth in this life, my acumen, my authority, whatever that might be, my standing, my brand. And so a lot of it's just plain selfishness on that score. But I do think there are people who are concerned. I mean, not just since we've been talking about things like feeding the hungry, specifically meeting those physical needs. Sometimes, I've even had that conversation of what's the best way to help someone. What is the best way, addressing those long-standing cyclical issues? Because you'll hear arguments like, well, we need the government to provide the help for people. We need to be paying more in taxes. We need to be, raising those rates and having more programs so that we can help people. And I think there's legitimate discussion and debate about the best ways to actually help people. Lots of times you'll wonder if there's somebody on the street corner with a sign and they say they're hungry and they need help. If I give that person money because out of, let's just say pure intentions, my heart, all I want to do is serve that other human being, show him the light of Christ. I don't want anyone to go hungry. And so I'm giving that person money. But then the question is, what if they take that money and they use it to feed a habit that is what caused them to be homeless, jobless, connectionless in the first place? Am I then, am I enabling versus helping? And I think those are legitimate questions, but that should not stop us from serving like Christ. So I'd love to get your thoughts on some of those checks that we go through and how to make sure that we are still serving like Christ and we're doing so effectively.
Oh boy, yeah. I think that you just that's where all the disciplines kind of come together. You're a student of the word. You're in communication with the Father continually. You're open and sensitive to the leading of the Spirit, and you're letting Him lead you. That's how you kind of break down the self-righteous versus the true service. And you just like you have this radar on. Okay, God, what do you want me to do today? And this back to that
Mm.
prayer of, okay, God, I'm here to serve. This is your day. I'm your person. This is your kingdom. This is your world. You just tell me what to do, and I'm going to follow you. I have an agenda, and I'm going to keep doing it. But if you give me an interruption, I'm going to go with it. And have the faith that God has a plan there.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's just part of the spiritual growth of the believer.
Mm.
There's a great example in scripture of, sometimes even in the church, when we all have this common goal, we're making disciples, we're building people up, we're evangelizing, we're teaching them, and this whole lifelong journey of us becoming more mature in Christ. And I love the example in First Corinthians when Paul says, well, what then is Apollos? What is Paul? They're servants through whom you believed, and each has a role the Lord has given. I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the growth. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only the God who gives the growth. Now he who plants and he who waters are one. Each
Mhm.
will receive his own reward according to his own labor, for we are we're co-workers. You are God's field, God's building. You think of the local congregation, we're all just working together. Whether you're a Sunday school teacher or the preacher or one of the leaders or leading a Bible study or a small group or the nursery, all the different things that happen in a church. We are serving. We're all equally serving. No one's better than the other. No one's greater than the other. It's not like, well, he's got the name tag of preacher or elder or deacon or whatever,
Right.
particular congregation titles might be thrown around out there. When we start using that as a hierarchy, we've missed the point. You know, we all together, we are serving our children to make sure they know Jesus. All together, a person comes in the door who we don't know if they know Jesus or not. We want to make sure they have a connection with Jesus before they go, whether it's through a sermon or a handshake or a smile or a donut, or, you know, all of us working together to serve people. We're all just servants playing a part in God's plan. And if every congregation and every Christian would approach every Sunday with that attitude of service, what a difference our churches would be. You know, oh, look, I better get the parking spot closest to the door because I don't want to walk in the cold or the rain or the heat, you know. And I always tell people, can you go to the last one? That'd be great. Because everybody else coming late's already nervous and scared and embarrassed and blah, blah, blah. What if they got to go to the best, you know, parking spot? That'd be great. What a way to serve. So it's like, it's every day, so many parts of our life. It's thinking outside of ourselves. Maybe it's even going with that selfish thought that you have and think, how about I do that for someone else, and yielding that for someone else. Like, again, whether there's a parking spot or a handshake or just a warm welcome. I've noticed through the years that, and it's subconscious, you know, I've been parts of very friendly churches before, and people have good relationships, and a new person, a guest, will come in, and like everybody will be in their little circles talking, and they like literally turn their back to the people, and they're not thinking, I assume, I don't want you part of us. They're just like, well, I'm more comfortable talking to Sally over here, and we can talk about you know, the diapers we changed yesterday, as opposed to, here's someone I'm awkward around new people. You know, what a great thing of service. I will always physically take a step back and open in the circle to like, hey, you get to be part of the circle too, you know, if you want to. And then if they keep walking, that's okay. But it's little tiny things like that that are hard to define, but it's part of being a servant.
That reminds me of, in a tangential way, it reminds me of something that I was reading in terms of marriage and how to serve your spouse. And it's delineating, it's good to know your needs and to be able to speak and communicate those needs, because, you know, how else are you going to get them met? But there was this concept of going first. And so if you are sitting around thinking, well, I wish that my spouse would do this for me, I wish that, you know, there's something that I want that I'm not getting. You can talk about that, but you can also decide, you know what, I'm going to be the one to go first. The thing that I'm hoping for, how about I just bring that in to serve the other person? Instead of making it about me, how about I take this opportunity once I've defined that and say, oh, that'd be really nice. How about I do that for them? Because somebody has to go first. Like, everybody's walking around, I think, lonelier now than we've ever been. Well, why don't we have friends? Because it takes effort to go and introduce yourself and become a part of somebody's life and find out how to serve that other person. What if you just went first? What if you were the one that went up to your neighbor's door and knocked on the door and said, hey, just so you know, this is my name. I live next door. It's nice to meet you. If you need anything, I'm here for you. Because somebody has to do that and go first. So I think Christians are opening that door. We're willing, and we have that confidence because, who are we? We're nobody. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks of us, because the King of the universe has already said that in Christ, we are his righteousness. So I'm like, everything's gravy after that. Everything else is good. So all we have to do, we don't have to worry about looking silly or goofy or any of those things. We just have to genuinely care about that other person. And that's the thing. And maybe that's where we can wrap up the discussion too. I love the practicality of what you said, to do our own little check and just make sure, am I doing this to be seen by other people? I hope not. I pray not. Am I doing this just because it's an overflow, it's an abundance of the love that God has lavished on me, and I just want to show that other person that they are worthy of that love too. But like as he loves us when we are unlovable. But what I mean is, if he loves me, then how can I not love you? How can I not extend that and show that to every single person out there? Because God loves you as much. Dan Hudson, now I will land the plane. Pathway Church in Johnston, check them out if you're in the area too. They are very servant oriented. They really have servants' hearts there. And I commend you, Dan, your family, and your congregation there to keep up the great work that you're doing. And we'll continue to pray for you, for your family, and for the ministry there.
Thank you very much.
God bless you. And thank you for listening to our discussion about service. If there's things that we missed, I always love opportunities to serve too, because you think of some of those traditional service ideas, but in my mind, one of the most, like, the biggest areas of ministry has been about my family, and so it's come a lot closer to home. It's, do I know my neighbors and what's going on and what their needs are, and getting to know them enough that getting to involved in your kids' school, getting going down the street to a neighborhood where maybe you don't associate all that much, and you start making friends and building relationships with the people there. I believe that true charity, true service happens through relationship. And then that's where a lot of the wounds in this world and the needs that are in this world are met. That's how God designed us. So it starts by building relationships with people, with individuals, just like you and me. Thanks for joining us. And if you'd like to connect with us, leave a comment below where you're hearing this. Email me, RebeccaHaynie@outlook.com, or on Facebook at FaithWorks Live, YouTube if we haven't been canceled yet. And until next time, we have a mission. So let's be about it. Our mission is to love God, to serve others, and to live free. Thanks for listening to FaithWorks Live.